My name is Ethan, and I'm about to tell you the story of what happened to me and my wife, Maya, on a day I will never forget. We decided to set up our camp near a quiet mountain trail, far away from anyone else. It was late afternoon, and the sun was slowly slipping behind the peaks, casting long golden shadows through the trees. Everything felt calm, almost too calm, like the forest itself was holding its breath. As we were setting up our tent, a man suddenly appeared on the trail. I didn't hear him approach. I didn't see him coming. He was just there. He was thin and hunched, moving in a strange, unnatural way, like his body didn't want to cooperate with him. His clothes were dirty and mismatched, and a wide-brimmed hat covered most of his face. He stopped a few feet away from us, holding a black bag in his hand, and said in a low, gravelly voice, "Could you help me get rid of this?" I looked at Maya, then forced a nervous smile and said, Sure. Where do you want us to put it?" He lifted his head slightly, but his eyes didn't meet mine. They moved quickly, scanning the trees around us. "Anywhere," he said, "just far away from here. Far away." In that moment, I felt something deep in my gut, a warning I couldn't explain. This man was dangerous. We tried to ignore him and go back to what we were doing, but he didn't leave. He just stood there watching us. Then suddenly, he dropped the bag on the ground, turned and walked into the trees, disappearing between them like he was never there. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then the bag moved. I froze. Maya whispered, "Ethan, did you see that?" Before I could answer, we heard something faint coming from inside the bag. It sounded like something trying to breathe. Every instinct told me to stay away, but I stepped closer anyway. As I got near, I saw a dark stain slowly spreading across the fabric. Blood. We backed away immediately. We didn't touch it. We didn't go any closer. We just told ourselves it was probably a dead animal and tried to move on. But the forest didn't feel the same anymore. When night fell, the silence turned into something else. Every small sound felt louder, closer, like it was meant for us. We got inside the tent trying to sleep, but then we heard it. A slow scraping sound dragging across the ground, circling around us. It stopped, then started again from another side. Maya grabbed my hand tightly. Then we heard a whisper right outside the tent. "I'm still here." My heart stopped. The tent shook slightly like something was moving around it slowly, watching us. Then everything went quiet. Seconds passed. Suddenly the tent flap was ripped open. It was him, the same man, but now his face was fully visible, pale, twisted, and his eyes were wide open, unblinking, and he was smiling. In his hand was the bag, and this time it was moving violently. He stepped closer and hissed. I said, "Help me get rid of it." We backed away in panic. I grabbed the nearest thing I could use to defend us. In desperation, Maya threw a bag at him, hitting his legs and causing him to stumble. He fell backward, and the black bag slipped from his grip and tore open slightly. For just a second, I saw something inside, a small human hand twitching. Maya screamed. The man tried to get back up, but he lost his balance and slipped down the slope behind him, disappearing into the darkness of the forest. We didn't wait. We grabbed what we could and ran as fast as we could down the trail, our hearts pounding until his voice was nothing but a distant echo. We reported everything to the nearest ranger station, but they found nothing. No man, no bag, no trace of anything. Days passed and we tried to forget what happened. Then one morning, I woke up to a faint scratching sound at our front door. I walked toward it slowly and opened it. There was a black bag sitting right outside. I froze. Maya stood behind me, her voice shaking. "Ethan, don't touch it." But there was something worse written across the bag in messy, uneven letters. "You didn't go far enough." And then right next to my ear, I heard it again. A soft whisper, "I'm still here." I've never been the type to scare easily, but that night, something felt wrong in a way I still can't explain. My name is Adam. I live alone in a small house just off the edge of a forest. It's old, quiet, exactly the kind of place I wanted. Well, not completely alone. I had my dog, Luna. She wasn't aggressive, but she was smart. Sometimes, a little too smart. That night I took her out for a short walk before bed. It was freezing. Snow covered everything. At first, everything felt normal, until she stopped. Just completely froze. The leash tightened in my hand, but she wasn't pulling forward. She was staring directly behind me. She didn't bark, didn't move, just stared. I turned around slowly. Nothing. The forest was completely still. No movement. No sound. I told myself she probably heard an animal, but something about the way she stood there didn't feel right. So I pulled her along and we went back inside. About an hour later, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when Luna started howling. Not barking, a long, uneven, almost warning kind of sound. She was standing by the window. I walked over slowly and looked outside. Snow covered the yard. The glass was fogged and frozen over, except for one spot. A small patch, perfectly clear, right at face level, like someone had been standing there, breathing onto the glass. I stepped back without thinking, stared into the darkness. Nothing. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Loud. I froze. Then a voice. "Hey, I need some help." Something about it felt off. It wasn't panicked, wasn't rushed, just calm. Too calm. I didn't answer. The knocking came again, harder this time. "My car broke down. Just need a minute." I looked at Luna. She was behind me now, shaking, letting out this low, quiet growl, like she didn't want to be heard. I raised my voice slightly. "Call the police." Silence. Then, nothing. Less than a minute later, the power went out. Everything. The lights, the TV, just darkness. And that heavy feeling, like the house suddenly got smaller. Then I saw it, through the curtain. Light. Headlights. I moved slowly, peeked through the edge. A black car, parked right in front of the house. I never heard it arrive. Then the knocking started again. But not on the door, on the window. Soft, repeated. Tap, 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 like fingernails. I stepped back immediately, grabbed my phone, called the police. My voice was low. I was trying to explain, but nothing was coming out right. While I was still on the call, I heard footsteps. Outside. Slow. Heavy. Moving around the house. Stopping, then continuing, then stopping again. Right by the door. I didn't move, barely breathed, until I heard the car engine start, driving away, slowly. The police showed up about 10 minutes later. I stepped outside, barely feeling my legs. They searched the area, didn't find anyone, but they did find something. Footprints, in the snow, leading from the road, straight to my window. then circling the entire house, ending at my front door. One of the officers said, "Looks like he left before we got here." I didn't respond, because I was looking at something else, something they didn't notice. There was another set of footprints, lighter, closer, standing right behind the first ones, like someone else had been there too. Since that night, Luna doesn't go near the windows anymore, and me, I don't go outside after dark. But the worst part isn't what happened. It's the feeling that whoever was out there wasn't trying to get in. He just wanted to make sure I was inside. The summer nights in the mountains were quieter than usual. My friend Mark and I decided it was time to try camping in one of the abandoned parks, far away from the usual crowded spots. We had found an old map at a local shop, and we were told that the park used to be full of activity until it was shut down due to a strange accident that occurred there. Even the trail leading to the site was unmarked in some places, and most of the map was unclear. But we were eager for the adventure, so we decided to go for it. We arrived in the early afternoon and started setting up camp. The park was full of thick bushes and tall trees all around us. The place seemed eerily quiet, almost too quiet. There were old paths, but they were overgrown, showing that the place had been abandoned for years. As we were sorting out our gear, we discovered something odd. Strange marks on the ground, like footprints that didn't belong there. We decided to go for a walk on the trail to see if we could figure out what was going on. Eventually, we made our way to one of the old towers in the park. It looked like it hadn't been used in a long time, but there were signs that someone had been there recently. There were strange things on the ground, like blood-covered handprints, and something about the place just didn't sit right with us. Then, from the distance, we noticed movement between the trees. We barely caught a glimpse of a group of people, maybe 4 or 5 of them, walking slowly through the forest. We were surprised to see anyone else out here, especially since no one was supposed to be at the campsite. From where we stood, we couldn't make out their faces, but we saw their figures moving through the woods. We tried pointing them out to Mark, but by the time he came over to look, they were gone, swallowed up by the forest. We figured we had imagined it and carried on with the day, talking and relaxing as the sun began to set. We built a small campfire and sat around it. The night was calm at first, just the sound of our voices and the crackling of the fire. Then, we heard something else. It was faint, but we both heard it. Voices, multiple voices, talking to each other. We couldn't tell what they were saying, or even if they were speaking in our language. The voices came from way out in the trees, and that's what made it even more unsettling. Mark and I didn't know what to do, so we stayed still for a while, listening. The voices didn't move. They stayed in the same spot. Then, without warning, they went silent. The next minute was unnerving. We didn't hear them fade out or leave. They just stopped, like they were still there. Then there were footsteps, just one set, coming toward us. A few seconds later, a man walked out of the dark and into the light of our campfire. He had a distinct red baseball cap. His smile was wide as he approached us. "Do either of you know where the trail is around here?" I pointed ahead and told him where the trail was, but when he didn't move or say anything else, I asked, "Are the others with you?" His face dropped for a moment before he smiled again. He looked back toward where I had been looking and said, "I didn't know there were others out here. I've been hiking alone. I would have asked them for directions if I'd seen them." It was strange. I was sure he was lying. He came from the same direction we just heard the voices in.
I just nodded, but something felt off. He smiled again and walked back toward the trail. Mark and I exchanged glances. We both knew something wasn't right. There was no way he came from the same direction as the voices and didn't know about them. But why was he lying? Why didn't he want to tell us about the others? We spent the next 30 minutes around the campfire, discussing what was going on. The whole time, I felt like we were being watched. I kept turning around, checking the trees and the trail. Something wasn't right. It didn't help that it was our first time so far out like this, and our nerves were already on edge. "Should we leave?" Mark finally asked, his voice shaky. I thought for a moment. "Yeah, let's go." We started packing, but the feeling only got worse. The more we packed, the more it felt like something was wrong. Just as we threw our bags on our shoulders and stomped out the campfire, a single footstep crunched behind me. We both whipped our heads around. Without the fire, it was pitch black. The woods were eerily silent now. For a moment, I hesitated. I fumbled for my flashlight in my backpack, took it out, and turned it on. There, standing only 10 or 15 feet in front of me, was the same man with the red baseball cap. He was staring at us, his blank expression unsettling. He wore that same wide smile, his eyes cold and lifeless. In a panic, I turned off the light and both of us sprinted toward the trail. Disturbingly, I could hear multiple footsteps behind us, some of them sounding like they were running through the woods beside us. The footsteps faded, but we kept running, desperate. We made it back to the car, out of breath but unharmed. We drove away, shaken but relieved. We still don't know what happened that night. Who was out there? Why were they hiding? It's been a long time since, but I don't think I'll ever go camping again.